Segment 2, Gold and Black Live. Friend of the show and a friend of Purdue University, Mike, more than a friend, he's a doer. Mike Berghoff. Michael is the chair of the Board of Trustees. He has been on the Purdue Board of Trustees since 2009 and has played a huge role not only in the university's development over the past 15 years, but also a very strong role in athletics. And a lot of the things that have happened in Purdue sports, Purdue athletics over the last decade and a half have his fingerprint on it. So, Mike, first, welcome to the show, and appreciate got a family wedding you're attending tonight, but in Chicago. But we appreciate you taking the time, or a friend's wedding, I should say. But we appreciate that very much.
Well, I always enjoyed being on. I know how important athletics is to the university and how many folks are dialed into Gold and Black. So it's a privilege to be involved.
Well, thank you. And I think everybody wants to know, in this crazy world of college athletics, and crazy means change. I don't know that it necessarily is, it's not the end of the world. It's just a big change. And obviously with not only NIL, the transfer portal, but there's been a lot made of the House decision, the House settlement, I should say, and the $22 million or thereabouts that are going to be part of athletic department's budgets to be able to compensate athletes. Talk about that and how that process has worked through the university's approach and how that is continuing to evolve.
Sure. This is a process that we've been chipping away at for close to a decade, when some of the legal parts of this were put in motion. And I'm not going to go through all the integrations of this, but the House case, we believe, is close to being probably the best outcome for Purdue that is possible. And that outcome is sharing the revenue that each athletic department generates through ticket sales, through merchandise, with some percentage of that revenue with the players. And we believe what's helpful about this is, one, it brings order to the process. We finally have, if this passes, and there's some work to do, we finally have a pathway that everybody in the conference needs to follow. And the second part of that's helpful to Purdue, that the percentage of revenues that are used to pay the players is the same for every university in the Big Ten. So it provides equal amounts of gunpowder for every athletic department. And we think that's a good thing for Purdue, because we're kind of in the middle. We're not in the lower third, we're not in the upper third in terms of revenue. We're kind of, trending towards the top third. And having equality in the amount of money is a good thing for Purdue. But we're not finished, So in the meantime, it's critically important that our fan base continues to support our NIL folks at the Boilermaker Alliance, because right now that's the substitute for what we hope is an equitable agreement through the House litigation.
Yeah, you have that, and again, a lot of talk about how the university will help assist in terms of that. They may not all be determined yet, but what do you see in that, from that standpoint, in terms of what needs to be done to be able to get to that $22 million, to be able to work out the details with the athletes?
Yeah, we're pretty close, in terms of revenue generation already, but there are some knobs that we will need to turn in order to meet the percentage of revenue share. And some of those are athletic expenses that the department has been burdened with for a long time. And some of them are probably better suited to be some of those expenses that they currently pay the university are probably better off and reasonably located in the university's responsibility to pay. It just hasn't been that way for
Yeah.
20 years. Like there's some overhead charges that the athletic department pays the university that might be out of whack. And so you have a number of items like that. And if you relieve that burden, it frees up more revenues for us to meet the revenue share percentage that will likely come out of house. I hope that's simple to understand, but simpler when you're on the inside than it is on the outside.
So potentially debt service relief, those kinds of
Right.
things as well could be
Right.
part of that deal. So
Yeah, and here's an easy one to think of for people who are, working in administrative overhead expense. Okay.
yeah,
It costs something to keep all the lights on and all the athletic offices and pay all the people who work there. And so there's some administrative overhead that gets applied to those departments, just like it gets applied to the College of Engineering and all the other
Yeah.
colleges. But there's room. There's room to review this and say, hey, are these expenses reflecting the actual cost to have an athletic department? And if not, and there are savings there, that helps us apply those to the revenue share.
So yeah, looking at that additional funds potentially that could be needed for, whether it be any other NIL opportunities for student athletes moving forward. How do you view that, and will that still be in play? Will it be still a challenge to compete with the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Michigans because of maybe more perceived funds that donors or boosters could put into it? How do you see that playing out down the road?
Well, in order for it to be fair, we're going to need some policing and some clarity on what's allowed what do we allow the students to do in terms of raising other income for themselves. We expect it to be something similar to what we already have, which is like the marketplace, which allows a student athlete to enter into an agreement with a private entity. Let's say it's a car dealer, and represent the car dealer maybe on a Saturday. But that's still being sourced out, and it is front and foremost to make sure that the playing field is level there, that it's not a back door to compensating the players on top of the money they make through the revenue sharing.
Yeah, you look at and it seems to me to make sense. If you look at all the television contracts and the money that's coming to college athletics, you're going to have competitive balance. I mean, it's going to have to somehow, as we always say, a Rutgers Ohio State game on a Saturday night on NBC needs to be a competitive football game, or at least be interesting enough to watch. I mean, is that a level of concern, or is this something that you think if you can finally get to a equal or close enough to being equal playing field, that this can be what you want it to be long term?
Yeah, we're comfortable and confident we can make it work. I mean, we've been in a way making it work already.
Yeah.
I mean, we're competing against the folks, the top, if you just look at, let's just take the football programs, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, their athletic budgets are larger than ours, and that provides some advantages to them. But it doesn't mean we're not competing with those folks.
Yeah.
We're planning on winning some Big Ten conferences and going to the playoffs. And we're gonna utilize whatever tools are necessary to help us compete to make that happen. And I think if with the right policing and the right setup, that can happen.
The crowds have been unbelievable at Ross-Ade Stadium through the first two games. The opportunity to have a near sellout against Indiana State, which was really remarkable. Notre Dame, obviously, you'd expect to have, but Purdue historically has sold that game out a fair amount of times. But really been impressive. Which, after a tough loss and a lopsided loss to Notre Dame, there's a lot to be said about, you got to keep things going in the right direction. How do from a board perspective, I'm going to guess you guys let Mike Babinski and Ryan Walters handle those types of problems and challenges. But how do you view that in terms of just where the fan base is with respect to attending games? You're going to probably have sellouts against Nebraska and Oregon as well. Things look good from that standpoint.
Man, I think for our fan base has demonstrated a level of commitment for the last 3 to 5 years that is astounding. To walk in there and look at a full stadium with 12 to 13 or 14,000 students packed in there is a demonstration of the commitment that Boilermakers have to the sports, and it's phenomenal. And I can't tell you how many times the board has gathered after a football weekend or a basketball game and just reflect on the commitment that our fans have. And this is a big shout out, thank you to all of you for showing up the way you do. And I'm confident we're going to compete at a level that their attendance and support is going to be rewarded.
Yeah. All right. Nothing was better than certainly with respect to a Purdue experience than early April in Glendale, Arizona, the opportunity for Purdue fans to meet and greet at an all-time level. Talk about the glow of that and just what that has meant, not only obviously admissions and interest in Purdue University, certainly on a worldwide scale. From an athletic standpoint was evident there, but it is something that was absolutely remarkable, and that glow still seems to be going on.
Yeah, it was just it was another example of a fan base that's dialed in and supportive. It was awesome. It was like a caravan, through the 3 different locations, and everybody who was watching in person or on TV, we just dominated the audience, and it in a way it was like a revival that rewarded our fans for the level of commitment that they provided our basketball program. I mean, I remember in 2013 talking to Matt, things were not well, but our fan base hung in, and look where we ended up, and the expectation levels up. We're going back, we're gonna get another couple of whacks at this. So it's just big for the university too. I mean, people see you in the airport wearing Purdue gear, and I think they like teams like Purdue to win. Our fans and just casual observers. So it was incredible.
You look at this situation, and you have a people say that it has never been quite like that. And I think that is a fair way to look at it. I mean, in Purdue, it just was unbelievable in terms of the approach, not only the approach, but it was like a weekend pep rally and then some, despite not winning the whole thing. That was certainly disappointing, but a sidelight really almost, as it turns out, from that standpoint.
It was phenomenal.
Yeah. All right. Now looking ahead, obviously, and talk about, I think what people be interested in terms of the board's role and how the board works with athletics, because obviously Mike Babinski is your point of contact and who you probably deal with more than anybody else. But to talk about that role as the board and as you as the chair, and I think I don't know that if my Klipsch is still the liaison, but give us all a little bit of background on how that process works.
Well, yes, Mike Klipsch is the liaison and has been really our point person communicating with the athletic department. You do want a streamlined access and exchange back and forth between the board and athletics. So that's the role for the liaison. You don't want 5 and 6 board members sharing their advice with the athletics and the coaching. So that channel works. But what? It's making good hires, trusting the talent and skill that you see all the way from the athletic director down every athletic team we have in the university, and asking them what they need to win. We know what the obligation and responsibility is academically for a Purdue athlete. That's well understood, and our expectations are high on the academic side. So now, what do you need to win? Because if we're going to do this, we need to be competitive at all the levels. And we are doing a really good job of providing our teams the tools that they need to win. I mean, I've asked Matt and Coach Walters, almost every time I see him, is there anything you need that you don't have? Okay. And so, like this weekend at when we had the bad loss, you dig in. That's not something you go a different direction. You dig in and say, what can we help you with to win? And that's an attitude that's just been created over the last 10 or so years. And I think it's the proper way to approach it.
Couple of time for a couple more quick questions. One, maybe in terms of what future, you always talk about building projects. There's certainly been some talk over the years about maybe the west side of the stadium that could be potentially a place to develop not only you need more housing, that's been talked about, but any things that are at least that you're looking at from that standpoint, not only from football or athletics related, but maybe ways to tie that into facilities at the university.
Well, we've done a lot to Ross-Ade and Mackey Arena in the last couple of years with the locker room renovation, and at Ross-Ade, some of the upgrades are subtle, Wi-Fi. We have a master plan for the stadium. I don't think the west side, the west side, is if anything, it might be just shoring it up. At one time we were thinking about something on the east side, but I like where we are size wise. I like having a stadium that's roughly 60,000 and an arena that's 14,000, and volleyball that's compact and intense, and two great golf courses, and swimming and baseball. I think we the last 10 or 15 years we've done a good job, and outside of some modernization and stepstones along the way for improving facilities, we're in a good space.
Going to be an interesting, I think. Last question, just over that. Are you optimistic with all the change that's going on in athletics? And you seem to me to be a pretty optimistic person. But talk about do you remain optimistic that this will all land in a good space in 10 years? 10 years from now, we'll be talking about college athletics thriving as much as it ever has. How do you view that down the road, or do you think we're still in such a challenge phase that it needs to be figured out?
Well, I'm optimistic about Purdue athletics. I'll tell you that. The trends, are fluid, and that makes it tough to anticipate, next steps. We're doing a really good job of that right now. I think if this settlement can be approved and close that door, and everything settles into place, it'll be different than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But I think it will still provide a college experience for both our student athletes and our fans that is enough to have our fans show up and enjoy everything about Purdue athletics. So yes, I'm just eager to get it resolved, and so we can move forward.
Yeah, I think that's if I'm in your shoes, I think all of us are that way to some extent, but dealing with it from a board administration, university level, I think you just you want to know what you have to deal with, and then you deal with it. It seems like
Right,
that's
exactly.
a reasonable approach from that standpoint. So, all right. Well, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I know your weekend will be better if the Boilermakers can get the job done at Oregon State tomorrow night. Big homecoming week, Nebraska next week. What a home schedule Purdue has. The next three of the four remaining home games are against marquee or teams that are going to be at the upper level of the Big Ten, with Nebraska, Oregon, and of course Penn State, Northwestern sandwiched in there as well. So Mike, thanks again. We'll be back in a couple minutes as Bart Burrell, somebody we both know well, will join us. He'll talk about his experience with being the honorary captain for the Indiana State game, but also just his experience as a Boilermaker, one of the great Boilermaker receivers and part of the Carmel connection. We'll look forward to that as well. So stay tuned. We'll be back in 2 minutes on Gold and Black Live.